I never imagined that my life would be summarized by a sentence so heavy with regret, yet so full of lessons that reshaped my soul. When I stood at the window every morning watching the street wake up, I used to believe that love was something that stayed strong on its own, like a wall built once and left untouched. I was wrong. Love is more like a garden that needs daily care, patience, and honesty, and I learned that truth only after I damaged something precious with my own silence and selfishness. My husband was a quiet man, not the kind who filled rooms with words, but the kind who filled lives with presence. He worked long hours, carried responsibility without complaint, and believed that providing stability was the purest form of love. In the early years of our marriage, I admired his strength and calm nature, but as time passed, I mistook his silence for distance. I told myself stories that were easier than the truth, that he no longer noticed me, that my emotions did not matter, that I was alone even while sharing a home with him. Instead of speaking openly, I chose the comfort of being understood without effort. It began with conversations that felt harmless, words exchanged with someone who listened closely and responded quickly, someone who made me feel seen in ways I had stopped asking for at home. I convinced myself it was innocent, that it was only talking, only sharing thoughts, only finding comfort. But innocence fades when honesty disappears, and each message I sent without my husband's knowledge placed another brick in the wall between us. What I did was not a single moment of betrayal, but a series of small decisions where I chose ease over integrity. I smiled at my husband across the dinner table while carrying guilt in my chest, believing I could manage both worlds without consequences. I forgot that love does not break suddenly. It erodes quietly when respect is neglected. I cheated not only on my husband, but on the vows I once spoke with trembling hope and sincere faith. Life has a way of revealing truths when we least expect them. The day my husband discovered the messages, he did not raise his voice or accuse me with anger. His silence was heavier than any shout. I watched his hands tremble as he placed the phone down, and in that moment, I understood the weight of what I had done. The man who trusted me without question was now questioning everything, including himself, and that realization broke me in ways I cannot fully describe. He asked me one question that still echoes in my heart. Was I not enough, or did I fail to listen? I wanted to say that it was my weakness, my fear, my inability to communicate, but words felt small in front of his pain. I realized then that cheating is not only about betrayal, it is about transferring one's unresolved emptiness onto another person instead of facing it with honesty and courage. The days that followed were filled with quiet suffering. We lived under the same roof, yet every step felt careful, every glance uncertain. My husband carried his pain with dignity, while I carried mine with shame. I learned that forgiveness is not immediate, and trust does not return just because someone is sorry. It must be rebuilt patiently, if at all, through consistent truth and visible change. I chose to face my mistakes instead of escaping them. I ended all contact that disrespected my marriage and began the harder task of rebuilding myself. I listened more than I spoke, accepted responsibility without excuses, and allowed my husband the space to feel angry, sad, or distant. Love, I learned, does not demand quick healing. It respects the pace of wounded hearts. Slowly, through honest conversations that were uncomfortable yet necessary, we began to understand each other again. I learned that my husband's silence was never neglect, but exhaustion, and his love was expressed through responsibility rather than words. He learned that my emotional needs were not complaints, but invitations to connect. We both realized that marriage is not about perfection, but about choosing each other again after imperfection is revealed. There were moments when my husband questioned whether staying was the right choice, and I accepted that he had every right to walk away. The greatest lesson I learned was that love does not mean possession. It means respect for another person's freedom and pain. When he chose to stay, it was not because he forgot the betrayal, but because he believed in growth, accountability, and the power of sincere change. Today, our relationship is not the same as it once was, but it is deeper, more honest, and more intentional. The scars remain, not as wounds, but as reminders of how fragile trust can be and how valuable it is when protected. I carry the lesson that communication is not optional, emotional neglect is dangerous, and loyalty is proven in everyday choices, not just in promises. If there is a moral in my story, it is this. Love deserves honesty, even when honesty feels difficult. Silence can harm more than truth, and unmet emotions should be shared, not hidden. Cheating does not begin with actions, but with the moment we stop respecting the bond we promised to protect. Healing is possible, but it requires humility, patience, and the courage to face one's flaws without denial. I share my story not to justify my mistake, but to remind others that relationships demand effort long after the wedding vows are spoken. Choose communication over comfort, respect over attention, and integrity over temporary validation. Because once trust is broken, rebuilding it becomes the hardest lesson love can teach, but also the most meaningful one if we are willing to learn.